And at this time, we're going to open up the meeting of the Fire Assessment Workshop. And before we do, I thank everyone for being here today. And if you would, just please be very respectful of each other. And also, Chief Carter is going to do a presentation to get it started. And then at the end, we will answer any questions y'all have. If we can't answer them, we'll get back with you. But, and please, when somebody's asking a question, please give them time to speak. Because if we start talking over one another, we won't hear what's going on. So I just ask that. And at this time, I'm going to ask I gotta catch my breath here. I'm going to ask Commissioner Andrews to lead us in prayer and a flag salute.
Let us bow. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day. God, we thank you for the ability to be here, Lord, and to do this work. God, we just ask that you will be with us, lead, guide, and direct us in every decision that is made. And Lord, just let it be it good with you, Lord, your will be done in this place, God. Help us to help this county, God, that we love also so very much, and do what's right for them. In your name we pray and give all the glory. Amen.
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 Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, this time, Chief Carter is going to come forward with the presentation.
All right. Well, good morning. And I'm going to be turning all different directions, so I apologize if I got my back to any of you. Yeah, as we talked about, obviously we're discussing the fire assessment this morning, and I think that it's important for us to have a good understanding of not only what that entails, but kind of where we've come from and how we've gotten to this position. Obviously, it's been a long discussion, right? This is not something that's happened within the last 5 years. We've been discussing this well back since 2001, as recent as 2017. We did a study completed a study for another fire assessment as well. So it's been a long time coming of what these numbers look like. But let's just go ahead and get into it. So how did we get here currently from 2020 up into the past 5 years? So on a meeting of August 20th, 2020, the Sheriff's Fire Department budget proposal came before the board. At that meeting, there was consensus from the board expressed to bring back the fire department underneath the Board of County Commissioners. Also at that meeting, the sheriff had expressed concerns with funding. As a matter of fact, Sheriff Smith added that the men and women currently responding to calls need to know whether or not the board is going to fund the fire department and what they can expect in the future. And we're still in that situation. At a meeting on September 8th, 2020, there was a special meeting called. There were a few things on that agenda, one of which was to approve the fiscal year 2021 Fire Rescue Operations and Action Plan. There was a vote to create a fire rescue department that was passed 5-0, to appoint Alan Parrish as a director, that passed 5-0, and then to approve a combined fire rescue budget of nearly $6 million, which also passed 5-0. At that meeting, Ms. Roden had pointed out that the unassigned fund balance that was used to fund that the department at the time is not a reliable revenue source. The unassigned fund balance is used to help balance the budget at the end of each fiscal year. The board will need to consider a reliable revenue source to fund fire operations in fiscal year 21-22. After that, Mr. Parrish, Director Parrish addressed the board and said that the plan before the commission is the best opportunity moving forward. It has been well vetted. The plan is being looked at as a long-term solution, not a short-term patch. The county has done a tremendous job of investing in in equipment and infrastructure. The missing piece is people. In order to have a quality department, you have to invest in people. In that fiscal year 2021 Fire Rescue Operations and Action Plan, it included one director or chief, one fire division chief, one EMS division chief, one operations captain, one training captain, 2 daily roaming lieutenants, 5 ambulances, and 3 engines. And this is the organizational chart that was approved in that operational plan. On March 17th of 2022, there was a countywide hiring freeze. We had 5 vacancies in our department. And so at that meeting, there was a decision that was made to eliminate that 5th ambulance. And that was, the options were either to staff that 5th ambulance with overtime, to hire people to fill those positions, or to eliminate that ambulance. And that ambulance was eliminated on 3/17 of 22 and has not been placed back in service since. On June 6th of 2022, it was moved by Vice Chair Andrews and seconded by Commissioner Thompson to appoint me as Chief of Fire Rescue, and that motion carried 5-0. I didn't know what y'all were setting me up for at that time, but thank you for that.
You're welcome.
This is our current organizational chart. As you can see on here, that 1 ambulance has been eliminated. We've also changed one of the chief's positions down to a captain's position. We only have 2 chiefs in our entire department, myself as the Chief of Fire and Rescue and our Division Chief, Dylan Rogers. We went from 59 full-time employees down to 53. So when people say that we've expanded and we've just grown and grown and grown and that I'm building an empire over there, that's incorrect. We've actually decreased since this was originally approved in 2020. Let's talk about NFPA 1710 and what that looks like. Now, these are national guidelines, and these are not things that we're held to by law, but these are national standards that have been vetted over many, many years, that they guide our responses and our matrix and our benchmarks that we use across the country. And I know that this is Bradford County, and we're not ever going to meet NFPA standards. I understand that, but I think that we should strive to get to that point. But I just want to paint a picture of how far apart we are from those standards currently. So NFPA requires that on a 2,000 square foot single family residence, you should have 16 firefighters on that call to manage that house fire. We can give you 7. For a strip mall, they recommend that you should have 27 firefighters on that call. We can give you 7. And for a first due response, they say that you should be on scene within 4 minutes. Our average response time across the county is 9 minutes and 18 seconds. So I want that to paint a picture of how far apart we are from those NFPA standards. I get asked often, and some of the questions that I've received from the board, what happened to our volunteers? Well, I can tell you that the volunteer requirements drastically changed, and for a long time in this county, we were blessed with an incredible volunteer system. I was a beneficiary of that. I started at 15 years old as a volunteer with Hilburn Springs Fire Department. So did my division chief, Dylan Rogers, and many of the sitting in this room today started as volunteer firefighters. And we're fortunate enough to be able to work here in this county still. But I can tell you that the volunteer requirements changed drastically, and not to mention the decline in volunteerism across all organizations. To become a volunteer firefighter in the state of Florida, it's 206 hours that are required for you to maintain that standard. Not to mention $1,000 just in coursework and books, not including the equipment that's associated with that. $1,000 either on behalf of the department or that's the responsibility of the individual themselves. I get asked about pickup trucks all the time too. Why are we driving around these nice fancy 4-door pickup trucks? We'll go into detail on that as well. This is my truck. I drive a 2021 F-150. That truck was completely funded through a state EMS matching grant, and the upfitting was completed in-house by Lieutenant Brandrick. Cost to taxpayers was the grant match at $7,595.50. Chief Rogers drives a 2023 F-150 that we purchased using unused grant match funds that was budgeted. Upfitting was completed in-house, which, by the way, saves about $10,000. If we were to outsource that upfitting, it's about a $10,000 job. Cost to taxpayers for this vehicle was $45,000. Our operations captain, Captain Mobley, he drives a 2021 F-150, which we traded a 2019 two-wheel drive that was transferred from the clerk's office after the IT department for the county was dissolved. They had a two-wheel drive F-150. We were able to trade that in. They actually gave us a significant amount of money, almost as much as we originally purchased it for, which the original purchase for that was done through CARES Act funding. Upfitting, again, was completed in-house. Total cost to taxpayers was $9,883.50. Our fire marshal drives a 2011 F-150 that was transferred from the sheriff's office. Upfitting completed in-house. Cost us $650 to put the wrap on it. training captain. He drives a 2024 Ford Expedition that was purchased through the opioid abatement settlement funds, $0 to the taxpayers. And same thing for our community paramedic. Same vehicle, no cost to Bradford County taxpayers. All purchased through opioid abatement funds. Our EMS lieutenant drives a 2019 F-150. This is one of our daily roaming supervisors. This was purchased through 2020 CARES Act funding. The vehicle and upfitting was done through that program, $0 to county taxpayers. And our fire lieutenant drives a 2016 F-550. Now, this truck was a bit of a Frankenstein. We took a 2016 brush truck that was out at Sampson City that had 9,000 miles on it and been used very minimally. It was also one that I didn't want to send into the woods and get beat up. So it was a very nice truck. We took that and we took an old Squad that was purchased through a grant from Hilburn Springs from 2006. And we took the body, and when I say the body, I mean this part back here, and this was the brush truck. So we took the brush bed off of the brush truck and put the old 2006 Squad body on there, and that is what they're driving currently, and that allows them to carry 450 gallons of water to be able to respond. They carry extrication equipment and all ALS equipment as well. People ask, why do we have four-door trucks? This is just a portion of the gear that all of us carry on our apparatus, and that includes the chiefs as well. We're all certified firefighters. We're all certified paramedics. So at any given time, we can stop. We can render aid to someone. We can manage a call with just one of us, if need be. And these are the numbers of vehicles that we've transferred over to Public Works, just the Public Works Department since 2020. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of savings to taxpayers that if these vehicles had not been transferred over to Public Works, they would have had to purchase out of county funds or done without. Let's talk about ISO. Everybody asks about ISO, what that means, and does it affect anything? So when we look at ISO, we look at our public protection classification as what ISO uses to determine insurance rates for the county. 1 is the best rate you can get, and 10 is considered no protection. Our current rating here in Bradford County is a 5, 5X, or a 10, and I'll explain what that means on this next slide. So Class 5 rating says that you're 5 miles from a fire station and 1,000 feet from a fire hydrant. If you meet both of those benchmarks, you earn that Class 5 rating, which is the best rating that we can give you on your insurance currently. A 5X means that you're 5 miles from the fire station, but you have no fire hydrant within 1,000 feet. So that's when you earn the Class 5X rating. You have still the benefit of being the 5 miles from the station, so you get a little bit of a reduction on your insurance, but you don't have that fire hydrant within 1,000 feet. And then a Class 10, again, which is the highest rating, means that you don't have a fire station within 5 miles and you do not have a hydrant within 1,000 feet. Considered no fire protection. So when we talk about stations, and this is including the Brooker station that's proposed, but when we talk about stations, this is our current operation as we have it right now. Up top we have Lottie, our station 50, Hilburn Springs at 40, Sampson City is 90, Brooker's 80, the rest is 20, and Speedville is 10. So what does that look like when we start talking about closing stations? What that looks like is now there was a gap here where there was no gap before. So all the people in this area now just went to a Class 10. Everybody who just went outside of this 5 mile circle, and these are 5 mile circles, sorry I didn't clarify that. These are 5 mile circles. So everybody who goes outside of this 5 miles just went to a Class 10 automatically. So what does that look like when we close Hilburn Springs? We've just now lost everybody in this circle right here that was covered before, now goes to a Class 10. And then let's just say that the Brooker station never opens. Everybody out here remains a Class 10. So the goal is to have the circles that overlap, and this is good coverage. This is good coverage for our people. This is good coverage for response and insurance ratings as well. But what does that look like in real world numbers? So this was obtained from a local insurance agent. For a wood frame, $400,000 $400,000 dwelling with a $1,000 deductible and a 2% hurricane deductible. With a property protection class rating of 5, their annual premium would be $6,798.06. That same house, we close one of those stations and they go outside that circle, that same house goes to a class 10. Their now annual premium goes to $8,745.38. That's real world numbers that were obtained yesterday. That was an actual quote. $1,947.32 increase, or 28.6%. Let's talk about our 2024 call volume, or 1,223 fire-related calls. Total calls for service that we manage was 7,536 to include all medical calls as well. That's an average of 21 per day. Our average response time, as we said earlier, was 9 minutes, 18 seconds. Our average call duration, so from the time we get on scene to the time we clear, is 1 hour and 32 minutes. Average scene time is 19 minutes and 40 seconds. And then our average transport time is 32 minutes and 7 seconds. That's how long our paramedics average or with a patient is 32 minutes and 7 seconds. We had 32 structure fires with 1 civilian fatality. 22 vehicle fires. We had 63 brush fires with 422 total acres burned. 259 motor vehicle collisions. And out of those motor vehicle collisions, we had 595 patients. We had 71 trauma alerts and 74 cardiac arrests. And of those 74, we attempted resuscitation on 57. We got ROSC, which means we got pulses back. We got their heart beating again on 29 out of those 74. State average is what we call the ROSC rate. The state average is 24%. Your fire rescue department is 39%. Let's look at truck utilization. Sampson City was our busiest engine at 1,154 calls for service. Busiest ambulance was here in Stark, 2,122 calls for service. Next busiest was, and they both track right in line with between Lottie and everything else to follow. So Station 50 Lottie was our next busiest, 1,050 engine calls, 1,347 EMS calls. Station 20, Theresa, and this includes the Speedville Fire Station as well, as 872 calls for service last year, and Medic 2 ran 1,299. But let's talk about why we're actually here, and that's fire assessment. So I'm hoping this will clarify some things for some people in the audience and for you all up here as well. Fire assessment, when we talk about the residential rate, is charged per dwelling unit. So if you look on your property card, it's charged per dwelling unit. What does that mean? That's a dwelling unit. This is, I don't know if you can read it up there, a little tough to read. This is the actual property card out of our property appraiser's website for this property. If you look right here under building characteristics, it shows one single family resident. Okay? Extra features, it's got some sheds and stuff like that. The only thing that will be assessed on a residential property is what's under building characteristics. So single family residence will only be charged 1 fee. This is another example of a dwelling unit. This is the property card for that residence. Again, under building characteristics, you can see where it shows it's a mobile home. It's got one building under building characteristics, will be charged 1 residential rate. It's got an aluminum utility shed under extra features and outbuildings. That will not be charged. Now, what about multiple dwellings on the same piece of property on one parcel? So this is one parcel right here. And as you can see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 homes on this property that all look in pretty decent shape, right? They are in good shape. I've got pictures of them. This is one of those properties, one of those homes. Second one, that's the third one, and here's the fourth, And these are used as rental properties. This is for sale on Zillow as a rental property. Now, when you look at this property on our tax collector's website, I'm sorry, our property appraiser's website, it has, under building characteristics, it has 4 dwelling units. They'll be charged 4 of the residential rates. So if it's $100, let's say, they'll be charged $400 for that property because they have 4 dwellings on that property. Rightfully so. They're renting it out. It's being used as a revenue source for them. And if it catches on fire, they probably expect us to come put it out. Extra features and outbuildings are not assessed, as I mentioned earlier. This is on that same property with the 4 homes that I just showed you earlier. But this is coded as an extra feature and an outbuilding. As you can see, it's this garage, class 3 right here. It's not going to be assessed, so that will not be charged. A building like this will not be charged. Your chicken coop will not be charged. Your horse barn will not be charged. Now, the caveat to this is if you have a built-out apartment inside of that horse barn with water and somebody's living in there and renting it out from you, and it's classified in the property appraiser's website as a dwelling unit, then you will receive a charge on it. This is a perfect example of a beautiful home right here in Bradford County that's also for sale. I should get something from all these realtors for putting all their stuff on here.
We know who your brother is.
Yeah. Again, beautiful home, 2,500 square foot home here in Bradford County that has multiple outbuildings, as you can see. Everybody agree with that? This is their property card. Building characteristics shows 1 single family residence, which will be the only thing that they're charged for. They will not receive charges for their other outbuildings and special features. Let's talk about vacant parcels. And we'll get to ag exemptions here in just a second. This is a vacant parcel that's for sale right now, 11 acres. If this is not classified as ag, it will receive a charge for the vacant land rate, whatever the board settles on for that. There will be a charge assessed for a vacant, non-agricultural piece of property. But if it is zoned ag, it's exempt. Meaning if it's zoned agricultural, they receive no charge. Talk about vacant parcels with the same owner with multiple parcels. So this is a perfect example. We have 2 20-acre blocks right here that's owned by the same person, but it's split up into 2 separate 20-acre parcels. So again, if this is not zoned agricultural, they will receive a charge for the west 20 acres as well as the east 20 acres. They'll receive a vacant land charge. However, if it's zoned ag, it's exempt. Let's talk about non-residential, commercial. Sorry, Stuart. I know this used to be your shop here, but we had to use it. It was on commercial for sale. So let's talk about this building. Okay, metal building, the auto garage. Let's look at their property card and see what that looks like. So when we take a look at that, we see here when we're dealing with commercial property or non-residential property, you look at the building characteristics again, and you go over to the actual square footage. So remember that the non-residential rate is charged at a price per square foot. And so this will be billed and assessed at 2,901 square feet times whatever amount the board decides on. This is another commercial property just south of town. Again, very large piece of property, multiple outbuildings. But when we look at their property card, we look at their actual square footage of the building characteristics, 10,845. That's what they will be billed on. They will be assessed on the 10,845 square feet. They will not be assessed on any other extra features or outbuildings. Let's talk about our exemptions that we have. Right now, our proposal is for churches, nonprofit organizations, and for government-owned buildings to be exempt. Also, 100% disabled veterans. If someone is at or below the poverty threshold, we're going to exempt them. And then again, as we already discussed, if it's zoned agricultural, it's exempt by statute. This is the 2025 poverty guidelines for the 48 contiguous states. And it shows you that if there's one person in your household, the poverty level is you have to, annual income has to be less than $15,650. I'm already going to gauge that using the indigent cremation form that we already have, in the county office. So that's already a process that we have in place. We're going to use that same form. Has to be notarized and repeated every year. There will be a grievance process. So inevitably, there's going to be properties. Mr. Riddick has one, for instance, that it's classified as 2 dwelling units on that property. But the second dwelling unit that's on that property has been essentially gutted. It has no walls, it has no power, has no windows. And so he's going to receive a charge for that if we don't catch it before the assessment, right? With his, we know it's an issue, and people can do this on their own. They can go into the property appraiser's website and figure this out. But he has that essentially now what used to be a dwelling unit that is now a shed. And so the process is he would email fireassessment@bradfordcountyfl.gov. This is a working email. You can email it today. Or you could call the number that's listed up there on the screen, which is a working telephone number. You can call it today and somebody's going to answer you. And the process will be that we go out and we take a look at it and we compare that with the trash and the garbage roll and all those things that, that are based off of, how much, if there's electricity to the building, if there's windows, if there's doors, if it's a livable structure, those type things. Myself or my fire marshal, we're going to go out there and we're going to do those things. And if it's something that should not be charged, if it is truly a shed now, we're going to take that off of your tax roll. So there is that grievance process that people can file a grievance and say, look, I think I'm being charged. So if you're charging $100 and you are getting 2 of those charges for, again, a house and a shed, we think that's inappropriate. And that's what we're saying is we're trying to work with people and trying to make this a comfortable thing. And then these were the last numbers that were proposed by the consultant group that came in. And really what's been talked about, I think, is the 50% rate. And that puts it at $167 annually for residential, 11 cents per square foot for non-residential, and for vacant parcels it's $47, again, without any of the exemptions. If you break that down monthly, let's take that 167, divide that by 12. You're talking about $13.92 per month. But I like to think about it in reality, and that's a double quarter pounder with cheese, a large fry, and a large Coke from McDonald's a month that you're missing out on. And with that, I'll entertain any questions you may have.
Mr. Chair.
All right, yes.
Chief, on the 5, the 5X, and the 10
Sir.
on the ISO rating, does the 5X, does that require a tanker truck? If you don't have a hydrant, then
Right.
yeah.
So the 5X does not require a tanker truck. We could achieve, even if, let's say that a house was outside of that 1,000 feet from a fire station, or I'm sorry, 1,000 feet from a fire hydrant, but they're within the 5 miles from a fire station. They have what's called a water shuttle certification that you can achieve through ISO. And that is accomplished by, you have to supply, it's 250 gallons per minute for up to 2 hours. And you have to demonstrate that to ISO. They come out, they do an evaluation, and they say, hey, let's look at this. And actually we did that when we first took over the fire department. We had ISO come out and do a water shuttle evaluation. We failed that evaluation because the spot they picked was at the far southwest end of the county in Brooker. So again, we failed that evaluation. But if we are able to obtain that water shuttle certification, then even if you're outside of that 1,000 feet of a fire hydrant, but you're still within the 5 mile radius of a fire station, you'll be able to receive the 5 rating. And we plan on doing that again once we are able to staff the Brooker station and get some response out there.
Yeah, of course.
Can we go back to the map?
Sure.
And I understand, sorry, the ISO, and it's wonderful to be a part of all that. But right now, like in our area out in Brooker, we're nowhere close. I'm very sorry. Kenny, could I have a bottle of your water, please?
Sure.
75 around here. Thank you.
Everything's 75, 100 or $7.
Got you no slack today, Chairman.
And go to the one where we take off Hilburn Springs, and I think it was, there you go. Just saying, to me, this is what would cover our county. We don't have the, and I know you have the slide with the number of calls.
Right.
Somebody asked my questions. Can we go back to that, to the slide that has the number of calls? Because your number one was Sampson City, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. What was the next
$75
one?
more dollars.
There you go. We're passing the hat before y'all leave now. What was the next one?
Next one was Lottie,
And the next one?
the rest.
And the next one?
Well, that was for, if you're looking at the left side of the screen, that's the fire apparatus on the left side, EMS units on the right-hand side.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think that's what we have to remember too, is that we moved our fire crew, the way that we split up Theresa is we moved our fire crew down to the Speedville area, but we left our medic unit, we left our ambulance in Theresa. And what that does is it allows for that unit that's down there in Speedville, has the same capabilities as that ambulance does. They just can't transport you to the hospital, right? So they can get there, they can treat you and stabilize you while they're waiting on an ambulance to get there. And then we left our ambulance in the Theresa area with the hopes that we're able to staff that with fully certified firefighter paramedics to be able to say, hey, you know what, if a brush fire comes out there, we can jump in the brush truck, somebody else take the ambulance, we'll meet there on scene. Same thing if it's a house fire, they can jump in the engine, one of them takes the engine, one of them takes the rescue, and they meet there on scene. But right now, as it stands, what we've got in Speedville are our fire personnel, and we've got our EMS personnel stationed in the Theresa area. And I think I don't want to get too far into mixing the two up, right? But I think that we have, because we're talking about the fire assessment today, but we have the opportunity to benefit both areas by splitting that coverage up. Because right now we have 4 at Theresa. We're sending 2 to Speedville and then going to leave the 2 EMS personnel in Theresa. That makes sense?
Yes.
And then for Hilburn Springs, our coverage out there is we have one of our daily supervisors who is there. The Battalion 2 truck that you saw that carries the water, the 450 gallons, is stationed at our Hilburn Springs site. So it's one person that's out there that's able to cover that area and give the homeowners there the benefit of the lower ISO rating. And in what you're talking about saving versus what it's going to cost the taxpayers, I think is the juice isn't worth the squeeze. But I think that, you're talking about for Hilburn Springs, the average utility bill out there is less than $300 a month. For Theresa, it's around $600 a month that you're talking for those buildings. So is it worth? We own the property, and the insurance rates, I don't have those in front of me for the 2 buildings, but you're talking about a $600 utility bill and a $200 utility bill or $300 utility bill. Is that worth increasing somebody's property's insurance by 30% if they're able to get coverage? There's a lot of insurance companies that won't write for a class 10. And I think that's what I'm saying. I don't know that the juice is worth the squeeze of shutting those stations down. Not to mention with Theresa, and I believe Hilburn Springs deed is the same way. If we close those fire stations, it goes back to the original owners.
Well, and my thing is, I hope that there'll be a day where we could afford to have everything that that we have and more, because I do know the need is great. But when we start looking at doing the assessment, I think we have to look at the cost, and we have to look at whether or not there are things that we can do to cut the cost to make a good decision on what the fire assessment, because of course we want it to be as low as possible.
Sure.
We all know there's a need. Everyone in the county knows that there is, but we want it to be, that we want our citizens to be able to afford it, and we want good coverage. But what I was saying is that the strategic places of the fire station, I think, is the first thing that we need to look at. I would love for my insurance to be lower too. I'm in that other percent that you were talking about, and it never will be. But I think that the first thing we look at is what's the absolute bottom of what we've got to have, and look at the placement, and just consider that.
And I
Is
think
where
we're
I'm
there
at.
based on call volumes and everything else. I think we're there. You know, and when we look at Brooker, for instance, you know, Brooker doesn't have the call volume to support a fire station. It does have the response time to support a fire station, though, right? Because
Absolutely.
it's 15 to 20 minutes before you get help out there, which is unacceptable in my book. But it doesn't have the call volume, so you have to look at all of those things. When you can't just put up a heat map and say, "But this is where all your calls are. Let's have a fire station there." And I think that we've got to have, you know, that's what we have to look at as a kind of a holistic view of what that looks like. But I think we have, you know, very well-placed fire stations as it stands, and we were fortunate enough to get those, you know, at no cost to the county essentially now. I mean, obviously, I know I'm sure there was some investment back then, but, you know, I think that it's important to look at the fact that if we lose those stations and they close down in 10 years from now, somebody's going to be standing here going, what in the world? Why did we let those stations go? And that's what I'm trying to look at, is not look at 2 years down the road, but look at 10 years down the road and the growth that we'll have. And that's what we're trying to do, is not necessarily, we're not trying to grow anything. As I just showed you on that screen, we've actually shrunk since we started this fire rescue department, combined fire rescue department. We've shrunk by 6 personnel. And I think that's important to remember, because again, this plan was well vetted. This plan was looked at very intensely, you know, before it was put into place. And even since then, we've been able to not grow our resources, but spread our resources a little bit. With the opening of Station 10, we didn't grow anything. We spread out that station. We spread out that coverage. Same thing with Hilburn Springs. We were able to spread out there to Hilburn Springs. It was something that the county already owned, the building, the property. We were able to utilize that station, put it into play, and give those residents the benefit of having that lower insurance rate. And I think if I'm a taxpayer looking at it, you know, if I'm paying a fire assessment now and you're closing fire stations, that's going backwards to me. If you're getting less service and my homeowner's insurance rates are going to increase, but I'm now paying for a fire assessment, is totally backwards, in my opinion.
So so for instance, shutting Hilburn Springs down, I mean, it would wind up costing the citizens out there more money on their insurance.
100%.
Yeah.
And I've been encouraged by many people in the insurance business in this town that if you have questions about ISO and if you think it's not relevant, please give them a call.
I know I talked to Scott the other day, and I didn't know that that helped that much.
Yeah. Like I said, that's an actual quote that I got yesterday. So that's real numbers.
And you have one man out there. What kind of vehicles is out there? Just that one?
We have, where'd it go? A vehicle.
You used to have an old rescue unit that stayed out there.
Yeah, we've got this. So again, this is the daily fire supervisor. He's in this truck right here, which is a squad truck. It's got 450 gallons of water. I think 450, 400, somewhere in there. Gallons of water on it. And they're able to, if they get to a structure fire, they're able to pull a line and get a knockdown on it, or at least keep it from spreading anywhere else. If they go to a brush fire, they're able to get a quick knockdown on that, prevent it from spreading anywhere else. And those are the things we look at, not just, you know, how far apart these stations are, but where's your backup coming from also? Because you got to remember that in each one of these fire engines carries 2 people, right? We're not a Jacksonville where there's 4 people per truck. We carry 2 people per truck. So if you're going to a structure fire, one person jumps in the engine, they take the engine. The second person jumps in the tanker, and they take the tanker, because there's no hydrants, right? In the county, there's not very many reliable hydrants. So, you know, we split our resources as much as we possibly can. And I think we do a lot with a little. And you don't hear about it because I think our men and women that are out there do a really good job of mitigating the problems before it ever gets to your level. And I think they bust their tails to do a great job to make sure that y'all don't hear about it. But there are issues out there, but we try and manage those issues in-house and duct tape those issues before it ever gets to your level.
Commissioner. Chief, just for my clarification on the cost, the rest, there was 1290, but those were medical response calls. Did they in fact respond out of the rest, or was it out of the Speedville group? I think it was 1299 is what I wrote in my notes from the rest. So,
Good. Yes, ma'am. 1299. You're correct.
those
That
were-
now that's for the EMS unit. That's for the ambulance.
for the ambulance.
Yep, and
How
they
many-
respond out of the rest.
Okay, and how many actual fire calls? That-
So again, 872 times is what the engine
Okay.
responded to. Now that doesn't mean that all those 872 were fire calls. They do respond to medical calls as well. So for instance, if an ambulance is transporting to Gainesville and we've got a truck coming from Stark or coming from Lawdy that's going down to Theresa, that engine will go, again, they have the same capabilities. They'll go and stabilize the patient while they wait on the ambulance to get there. If you call 911, somebody's showing up, you don't care what truck's parked outside. Somebody's showing up there to help you and stabilize you. They can do everything that an ambulance can do except for take you to the hospital.
So do we have any definitive data on the number of calls for structured fire?
Yes, ma'am. Yep, that number was, I believe it was 32.
32.
But in your packet there, you have a folder in
okay.
front of you.
Okay.
Those are the actual, there's a couple things in there. It talks about the NFPA 1710. Also talks about the statutory requirements as it relates to volunteer firefighters. And then there's also a call breakdown. It shows you exactly what type of call it was, whether it was a vehicle fire, whether it was a fire in a mobile home, whether it was a explosion, whether it was a brush fire, anything like that that you want to see is in that booklet. And I can pull whatever numbers you want to
Okay.
see.
I'd just like to get the whole presentation that you
This
presented to us.
presentation here, I can send you a copy of it.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, the other part of my question was how often persons would need to respond. And I heard what you say about the ISO rating. And I know when I was with the city, that was one of the big things, making sure that we met those ratings. But I'm finding on a personal basis, it doesn't matter the ISO rating, the insurance tripled, despite being less than 2 miles from the fire station and the fire hydrant within 100 feet.
Right.
Didn't help. So, and I hear what you're saying, you got to contact, but my question is, how much is it truly helping the residents?
Well, I mean, I would dare to say that your rates probably would have quadrupled if you didn't have that protection. But again, the evidence is right there on that quote that was obtained. I mean, this was, again, I obtained this quote yesterday on a real life property. It's just as if I were going to buy it, and 28.6, almost 30% increase, going from a class 5 to a class 10.
And ideally, we want to have stations where you didn't have more than 5 miles to have someone to respond. But when you truly look at Hilburn and Theresa, it's not manned by your folks. So, but we maintain the two structures because at any time, if you went by one of the stations, there's not going to be anyone there.
No, ma'am, that's incorrect. They are manned.
Yeah, they're mad.
They're staffed.
Maybe they just don't have vehicles there. But anyhow, the point is, if we can look at whether or not that we truly needed to keep the two stations with the minimum number of persons there,
Right.
then taking a look at it.
Sure. And I personally have done a lot of looking into that, and I would say yes, we do. But again, that's my professional opinion.
And in your extreme parts of the community, like the Keystone area and Loudy and Sampson City, or Brooker, you truly do need people at those extreme areas. And we have you guys right here in the middle of the city, along with our city fire department that helps within this geographical location. But how we might thoroughly look at whether it's really feasible to have the other two that are minimally staffed.
And I agree with you. I think that, when you look back at kind of what happened and how we've gotten here, we inherited everything that we have from the volunteer fire departments. And so we essentially inherited their buildings, their locations. We didn't pick those locations. We didn't pick any of that. It was, now at one time, I'm sure somebody sat down and said, okay, these are perfect spots to put a fire station. And that's how it was mapped out. And that's, when we took it over in 2020, we looked at it and we said, okay, we're going to put one fire crew at Sampson City to help with the middle of the county and get out to Brooker. We're going to put one in the north end, and then we're going to put one in the far south end. And that was how it was laid out. We bounced back and forth doing 2-3-man engines and just putting them, at 2 locations rather than 3. But again, for the insurance ratings and for the betterment of the community, we said, let's spread those out and get them at 3 different locations. And it's worked out well. It is a long time when you're 2 firefighters fighting a house fire and you're waiting on your backup to get there. It's a significant amount of time. And so those are the type of things that we look at. But, I do think it's been well vetted. I think they've been very much looked into. And I'm happy with where the station locations are at. And I certainly would hate to see anything go away for the people in this community. And not to mention when we talk about, the fire assessment in general, we were talking about a fire assessment when it was all volunteer. So the fact that it's a paid department, the fact that we have this many stations or whatnot, it really, I don't want to say that it's a moot point, but it's certainly, there's a need that's been shown for a fire assessment well before it was a paid department. Again, it was talked about when it was a volunteer department. It was talked about when it was under the sheriff's office, and it's being talked about again today. And I think that's what we have to focus on, is look at history and go, it's not because we took this over and we've combined it with EMS and all these things and we have, 3 stations or whatnot. It's because it's a needed thing. It's the right thing to do for the community.
There's no question that we need the fire assessment. That's not
Sure.
a question. But the feasibility of what all we have.
Right.
Is there any portion of what we have we can do without?
I would say
We
that.
don't want to impede the safety or affect that in any way, but is there anything that we have that we don't have to have? And especially when we're looking at the fees that we haven't determined that yet,
Sure.
but it's going to impact, all of the resident, or the majority of them, rather.
Yes, ma'am.
So, but I'm not questioning whether we need
Sure.
that, but what we have, is there anything that we can consider?
And again, my position would be absolutely not. I think we have good coverage for this community and what's right for our citizens, especially if they're going to be paying for a service.
And also to add to what you said, it was $75 assessment they were trying to get on right
In
before
2001.
Actually, yeah, right before 2001, and that was when we had a volunteer fire department.
Yes, sir.
And today, if we did go with what you're talking about, it'd be $167 per resident, 11 cent per non-residential, and $47 for vacant. So, and that's for full-time firefighters. So,
And please make no mistake, I want to make sure that I give the volunteer departments a proper respect, because they carried this county along for a long time. I have a lot of respect for all those men and women. Again, I grew up as one, and so I have a ton of respect for those men and women. So please don't ever think, and I hope no one out there thinks that I would ever disrespect the volunteers or say that, it's unfortunately, the volunteerism in general has just declined, and the regulations and guidelines and statutory requirements have increased so much that it's just not feasible.
Well, and I think that too, that's why Brooker did not have a fire station. They had a wonderful firefighters
Absolutely.
out there.
I talked
But,
to Mr. Tony yesterday.
Yes, and So when we talk about if Brooker never happens, I don't think that we should ever consider that.
I'm with you.
Because it, like you said, when you were up there, you were talking about it takes a 9-minute response on an average. When you come into Brooker, it's going to take you at least 20 minutes. And if you go on down 18, it's going to take you another 10 minutes to get down there. So we're looking at the thought of it never opening should not even enter our mind. It needs to be there for those citizens.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. And I agree. I feel like we're moving forward as fast as we can to try and get that going. If there's no other questions from the board, I got you covered.
Oh, okay.
One more.
I think Ms.
One
Rachel
more.
had it.
Okay, one more and then
One more,
I
and
got you.
I'll
I
let you
see.
go, Chief. Thank you. You said the budget back in 2020 was 5,975,000 or so,
Yes, ma'am.
but now it's almost double.
Yes, ma'am. So I believe our budget was just right around 10 million this year. And so with that, that includes all of our grants and all those things as well. But that also includes the minimum wage, Medicaid minimum wage mandate that happened in 2022. In October 2022, they mandated that we pay all of our employees at $15 an hour. And that was a big hit. That was a big hit for the department and for I think it was a great thing for recruiting. It kept us competitive with surrounding departments, but it also was obviously a big ticket item for the county to bite off on. But it put us in really good position to be able to still maintain, good employees and keep good employees here.
Okay, so that was just my question. What made it double?
That was the
And-
significant jump. Was
and-
the mandate, the Medicaid mandate, back in 2022.
Okay. And let me ask one question before I turn it over to the audience. Were you going to be able to pull up the properties if they wanted to see exactly what theirs would be?
Oh yeah, I've got internet right here. We can go on the property appraiser's
Uh,
website right now, and I can walk you through your property if you'd like
If,
to.
I tell you what, while we're doing this, if you want to pull up that one you was talking about on mine,
Sure.
so that people can see. And then also, while he's pulling that up, I'll start asking questions from y'all, whatever y'all want. If you do want your piece of property pulled up and we can answer questions right now, would be more than happy to do that.
Miss Rachel had a question.
Mr. Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask Chief Carter, because we've briefly talked about this. Is it counterproductive or is it hurting us to have, based on our current operations, the number of staffing that we have because of, so is there an interest actually in maybe increasing our staffing to help reduce overtime? Could there potentially be that cost savings?
Yes, ma'am.
That's-
And that's something I was going to bring before the board at a different date. I didn't think it was appropriate to bring up, the whole presentation in the fire assessment workshop. But yeah, I mean, when you look at our staffing, right? If somebody's out in the clerk's office, say, or in the road department or wherever, that that tractor is shut down for the day, or somebody's just not filling that position at the clerk's office that day. For us, we're at minimum staffing. So if we have one person missing off an engine that day, we have to call somebody in order to fill that position. Otherwise, we shut that truck down. So what happens is, because we have 16 positions per day and we have enough personnel to fill those 16 positions per day. And so what happens is, when somebody's out, we have to call somebody else in from another shift to come and work overtime. And so, yes, it shows that, we have a lot of overtime because of that. And there's something that NFPA puts out, it's called the relief factor. And what that tells you is, based on how many vacation days you have, based on how many sick days you have, if you have 16 positions per day, you're supposed to have X number of employees, to cover those 16 positions. And so what I'll be bringing before the board to reduce the amount of overtime that we're paying out is to hire 3 additional staff. Now, let's say that there's not per day, but that's 3 additional staff, so 1 per day. And what that'll do is, if somebody's sick that day, it allows that one person to be paid at their regular rate to go fill that position, rather than calling somebody in on overtime to come in and fill that position. So it drastically reduces the amount of overtime that's paid out for vacation days, sick days, and those type things. But yes, that'll be something that we discuss in a little bit further detail.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring it up today if that wasn't your intent.
No, I think it's a good mention.
I figured it was good
Yes,
to at
ma'am.
least explain from staffing from where it was to where
Yep.
it is, and maybe that it might be advantageous to, the financial component
Right.
to maybe go back to the staffing that maybe we need to be able to handle the overtime.
Absolutely. When I met with the clerk's office originally about it, I said, please don't throw anything at me. I'm going to ask for more staffing to reduce overtime. So, but those won't be like a mandated position. So instead of, if that third person is out that day, they just are out that day and we don't fill that position.
But could those staff be a part-time staff
We do that right now. We have part-time employees.
to offset the overtime, not the extended day,
Right, right.
because that's a whole different item, but the actual overtime that's worked? Because if I'm paying someone that's making $35 an hour, overtime, then we're looking at a huge amount compared to somebody that I can pay you hour for hour.
And we're on the same page. That's what we're talking
$15.
about. We're saying hire these people, but we'd have to bring them on full-time because again, the part-time, we have a list of about 16 part-timers right now and it's unreliable to get them to come to work. And because they're working other departments where if they work in another department, and they get an opportunity for overtime there to make time and a half, they're going to do that rather than come here to make $16 an hour. Right. So, that's why we have to hire those at a full-time, and as a full-time employee rather than part-time employees to truly do what you're talking. But that's exactly what we're talking about is instead of giving overtime, we're going to be using that full-time position to fill that overtime at their base rate. I can show it to you. I can lay it out better on a Excel spreadsheet.
Okay.
Mr. Cornegay, did you have something you wanted to say? Okay, all right. Okay, did you want to pull that one up or we can just move on? It doesn't matter.
Totally up to you. I'm happy to do it if you'd
Whatever's
like.
back. But anyway, we got a question from the audience. Mr. Baker? You're right there. I can hear you.
Volunteers earlier, they work, it was the greatest people we ever had in Bradford County. They volunteered their time and everything. And no disrespect for the firemen and all that, they got their union and all that. But, Hampton had a great fire department. Now we don't have one. I think you was on the seat. I'm not sure if Kenny or who else was on the seat, run them off. Took everything we had in Hampton away. We had, they was on, they'd go call, they had a pager they wore, they got called, they'd be there. But then they got run off. But look like me, you could have trained them for that $1,000. I think he said $1,000 could have trained them, 200 something hours education. I believe they would have loved to have done that, but nobody offered to pay their way. They was gonna have to pay for it. But a man out of his own pocket, volunteer, I think he would have took the opportunity to take that $1,000 and took the class and still been on volunteer and would have free help, what I would call free help. And not have to have so many real firemen and real paramedics. But that's just my opinion of it, They didn't have to have no chief, no boss man. They were grown men. They knew what they was doing. But anyway, and they was young guys too, though. Like you said, started out young. They didn't need no boss man to grab them by the hand and show them what to do. But anyway, that's just my opinion of it. Anyway, thank y'all.
And
And I agree with you. I think that, had those investments been made back then, we'd be in a different situation now. But just to clarify, each one of those volunteer fire stations, there were 10 in the county, and each one of them had a chief, an assistant chief, and a lieutenant at each station. Well, as a volunteer, they weren't staff there. They had their chain of command at each one of those stations. Terry McCarthy, Mike Brown, many others. Percy Sullivan,
Who was the head chief?
Adam Hall was chief.
Adam Hall.
Adam Hall, yes, sir.
I didn't even know.
Adam Hall was chief and,
Not room, but anyway.
yeah,
This is 10 years, 10 years he was chief.
Okay.
yeah. And Scott Davis, Scott Davis, Adam Hall.
But it ain't true on that board, but I can promise you that.
Yeah.
I'm not getting into that though.
Yeah.
We'd argue all day about make things work better for Bradford, what we're trying to do a little cheaper, if I ain't mistaken, but I could be wrong. But anyway, I pay a lot of taxes like the rest of y'all.
And I just want to say one thing. Before it closed, my son was actually one of the chiefs at Hampton Volunteer Fire Department. So I tried my best. I went down there and helped them remodel that station, build all those racks for the hoses. I did not want to see that station close either. But also, in some of our meetings, even Mr. Percy Sullivan, who's passed on, and his son Rusty Sullivan, they did an excellent job in Theresa. But they came to our meetings and even flat right there told us, hey, we cannot get the volunteers. We can't get people to volunteer. And they said, we're getting too old to do this job. I'll go back, Charlie, I'll pull the minutes and hand them to you. But yeah.
Go ahead and just speak all you want. I'm just tired of coming up here. I won't be back no more. Don't worry about it. Just
Okay,
talk all
well,
you I just paid $167 ago.
Okay, well, all I'm trying to tell you is,
I can
like,
promise you, write it down on the thing, in 10 years now, that there would be a $300 or $400, write it down, you watch who I'm telling you.
right,
I'm just-
right, right, right. All right, any other questions? Yes, go ahead.
In regards to the ISO, the higher the rating, the state will actually give you grant or state funding.
You know, I don't know about that, honestly. I'm sure it would probably make it more appealing for, you know, to bring somebody down into a lower classification rating. You know, I can tell you that when we apply for federal grants through FEMA and things like that, one of the first questions on there, like if we put in for a fire truck through the AFG grant through FEMA, one of the first questions on there, does this fire truck help to bring you into compliance with NFPA 1710? And so a lot of those federal grant programs use NFPA 1710 as their guideline, and that's kind of their gauge. And same thing for the SAFER grant for staffing. They say, you know, would funding these positions bring you more in compliance with NFPA 1710? The goal from the federal national standpoint is to get everybody closer to those NFPA guidelines.
The higher that you go, especially for a lot of the cities.
Sure.
Or for the towns and municipalities, the higher the rating is, there is some sort
Yeah.
of state funding. That will help balance out the taxes, other than reducing it. The other thing I was gonna say, I think, as Clay County is expanding, so it's starting, you know, this is starting to grow, so you're gonna have all these different commercial places coming, is that I believe with the International Fire Association, there is a mandate that you have to have eventually how many firefighters per building, things of that nature. So that's something that down the road, as more of these investors start taking these buildings and starting to build more houses and more commercial spaces, then you're gonna have to really think about also the compliance issues that you have to comply with the fire department. Since it's now not a volunteer, it's now gone up to the next tier up with being an actual paid fire department. So I think there's a lot of other things to consider in that aspect too.
And that has been discussed over the years, as far as, you know, we look at it, you know, from an economic development standpoint too. You know, who's going to protect my inventory? You know, who's going to, again, if you're looking at, say it's, you know, more density in a subdivision, you know, again, you know, how are you going to get protection to those areas? Who's going to protect those areas? I just want to say, and I think Mr. Baker's right. 10 years from now, it will be more. And 10 years from now, anybody that sits on this board will make more money than they make today. And anybody in that clerk's office, that budget will go up. You know, in the sheriff's office, the budget's going to go up. So I agree with what he's saying. But again, in 10 years, you know, certainly the need's going to be there. And so therefore, you know, certainly it could end up being more. I just want to say something else too. And I know we've talked about this. I've talked to Mr. Cornegay about this, you know, and just, you know, going off of Mr. Baker as far as the volunteers, and you said it yourself. I don't care whether it's the schools, whether it's a hospital or wherever. It's hard to find people to volunteer. People just don't want to step out there. They just don't, whether they don't have the time, they don't have the desire, you know, whatever it is. I talked to you about the part-time fire department. You know, we're in an area where we have St. Johns County, Alachua County, Duval County. We have a lot of big counties, or Clay County, big counties around us, where you would think that, well, hey, you know, they come over here and just work part-time and fill those needs. But as the chief was saying, you get into situations to where you don't have those part-time people available because of, one, they're either going to stay where they are and make the overtime, or two, they're going to be in a situation to where if there's a disaster, they're going to need everybody that they can to be on staff, just like we'll need everybody that we can have to be on staff. And something else that resonates with me too is, you know, you look at cities across this country, public safety is paramount. And I think what happens is when things don't go people's way, whether they vote for it or they don't vote for it, the first person, I don't want to wear your badge, but I don't want to wear the badge of not being able to provide for public safety.
Yep.
And I think that's where we are now, is because no matter, you know, people say, oh, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. I mean, we had 2 incidents last week that you never thought would have happened. and they happen, because that's, and that's why y'all are there to respond. So again, I wanted to say that because again, I just don't want to be, if we're ever in a situation where, something does happen, that people are sitting out there and the first person they're going to blame, or the first people they're going to blame, is the 5 people that are sitting up here.
And I don't take my role lightly, right? I have to play a balancing act of keeping the board happy, being good stewards of the county's money, and also supporting the men and women that are doing the job out there. So I'm in an incredibly tough situation sometimes, where I feel like I'm, if the kids just want to eat ice cream for dinner every day and dad's got to tell them no. I mean, I feel like I'm in that situation sometimes, but we've got a lot of really good men and women that work for our department. I mean, we can truly say the best paramedics in the state of Florida. And I think that our fire personnel are coming up to that par as well. And I think that, for me, I wake up every day, I go to sleep every night, knowing that I'm responsible every time that 911 phone rings in dispatch. That's on me. And that's the stuff that you all don't have to be burdened with. Yes, you're responsible for it, but I'm truly responsible for those men and women, the work that they do, and every time that 911 phone rings in dispatch. And so when you say you wouldn't want to wear the badge, it is a heavy badge to wear sometimes, but I love that. I love being in that role. And I feel like I try and do a good job of being a good steward for the county's money, because I'm a taxpayer here as well. I was born and raised here. And so I want to do what's right for this community, but I also care about protecting the people in this community. And that's really where my heart is. And that's first and foremost on my mind. Yes, I obviously am going to be conscious of our money. I'm going to be, again, a good steward of our money, but my job and my role, and my first priority will always be taking care of the people in this community.
And it shows, because I tell you, I never get any complaints about the service or the quality of the people that go out on the rescue or the fire. I never get any of those complaints. The only complaints I get is, why is it going to cost money?
And can I tell you why that you don't get those complaints? I'm sorry to interrupt.
No.
But you don't get those complaints because, again, the men and women out there are managing those issues, right? When one person's on a fire truck in Theresa and the other one's on a fire truck in Lodi, but 2 of them are gone because they're on an ambulance together, and they meet up, and now it's 2 fire trucks on a scene, but there's only 2 people there to fight fire. They manage those issues, and those are things you never see, you never hear about, and you never will, because we won't let it happen. Mm-hmm. We do a really good job of not failing, and that's what we're going to continue to do.
And also for the people that ride in that ambulance for 30 to 45 minutes, I want the best that there is working on me while I'm trying to get to the hospital. So, I appreciate that too. And I always hear good things. And we're always getting emails or something with people saying how great our service is. So
Good.
Anyway, so I mean, and if we were getting those complaints, then this might be a totally different issue, but we're not. Yes.
I don't think we're here to talk about politics.
Agreed.
How far along are you in deciding about these? I mean, obviously, you can charge the businesses by the square foot, what charge the housing, the residential by the square foot, or by the assessed value. I mean, it doesn't seem right to me. And I know you had this big study done, but we all have computers now. I think it could be figured out without doing a whole new study.
This actually is a legal issue. It's what an assessment is, how that's defined in our laws that we all, that really in not just Florida, but it's pretty typical in other states and local governments around the country. And that is that the value is commensurate with what is received, the service, the cost of what is received. And taxes are different. than assessment. Taxes are based on, obviously people who have more expensive houses pay higher taxes, right? So if they raise the millage rate, then that will have different impacts based on the value of your property. But a house is a house is a house when it comes to response, what it costs to get people to show up at your doorstep whenever there's a problem. And so that's, if you went down the road of doing it based on square footage, then you would get into legal problems. Well, and businesses are a little different just because of the nature of how they.
How is the law written? Is that what you're saying? The law says?
Yeah, the law says you got to do it this way. That's right.
The law says we have to assess every residential equally.
I don't think it says that in particular, but I would have to go back and I didn't write this. I'm just telling you what I know, having dealt in this area of law and being an expert in this area of law for a long time. That how you deal with assessments. That's why you get somebody to come up and do the report, and they determine how much is the value of what the piece of property is receiving. Okay, and then that dictates how much the thing costs. Okay, whereas when you do taxes, it's just strictly based on ad valorem, which is based on what the property appraiser says a house is worth. They're just two different analysis. I don't want to say 1,000% if you showed me and I was a judge some report that was prepared that could be defensible if somebody sued, which is what you need to prepare these things in a manner so that you're not paying lawyers to defend your what you've prepared to raise the money. You want to use that money that's raised to pay firefighters and to buy equipment. You don't want to use it to pay lawyers, right? So you need to make sure. So one of the things we do to protect the integrity of the system is you hire a professional to go and look at what is the value of what the chief and his department is providing, right? And then how do we put that value, the value on each of the pieces of property where people live and families live around the county. And so any difference between one house and another would be so minuscule that it's not even worth doing.
I think every fire is different.
Well, of course, every fire is different.
If you can assess
Right.
that says you're not looking at it as a fire is a fire is a fire. You're looking at it, businesses are different from residential. And I'm not, and also you can't tell by looking at it, what some business is gonna pay. Is 11 cents. Does it add up to $167 or does it add up to $30?
I'm simply answering the question that you posed as to why you find a situation where houses have different values, but their amount is the same. I'm answering that question. I can't speak to the $11 a square foot or whatever, whether that's reasonable or not, whether the costs are reasonable or not. I don't. That's not my job. What I'm telling you is from a 50,000 foot perspective, the law is pretty clear that what you're describing as what you think would be a fair way to do it, and maybe it is a fair way to do it, is to do it through paying for it through ad valorem taxes. Well, that's not what's before them. They're not saying we're going to raise ad valorem taxes to pay for this cost. They're saying we're going to do it by assessment. And when you do it by assessment, there's a whole new set of rules that you have to follow that are different than what you do for ad valorem taxes. That's the extent of my comments.
And just to follow up on that, this does give you the breakdown, and these are all obviously available through public record. This does give you the breakdown of what percentage the residential versus non-residential versus vacant, and what that amount will generate. Sorry, we'll stand by for just a second for the noises outside. The other thing I did want to address is the reason that they do residential, or I'm sorry, non-residential, commercial based on square footage is because there's such a vast variation versus, from a Walmart to a Mr. Riddick's cabinet shop, right? There's a huge variation in square footage there. So the only way to capture that would be doing it based off square footage. Whereas with a home, sure, you're going to have, some.
You'll have some houses that have 5 bedrooms and some that have 3, but that is not, but that's there's a big difference between that and a Walmart and, my law office that, and what would be, what it costs to service
Right.
the things that happen in a Walmart, with emergency, people probably have an event every day.
Sure.
At an average Walmart of some kind. They do not have an everyday event at a house. Thank goodness.
And we're going to send, sorry, I didn't interrupt you, Mr. Bradley.
No. I wanted to expound on why it's proper under the law.
Right.
Not because these 5 or that individual or the people they hired to prepare the report think this should be, that the law dictates all the things we're talking about. But the reason why the law is grounded in reason, however, and we're trying to articulate that reasoning.
And I can tell you for a house, for the most part, whether it's 1,000 square feet or 3,000 square feet, we're going to send the same response. For Mr. Bradley's law office or a Walmart, we're going to send a very different response to those 2 structures. So that's why the homes are assessed pretty much at a standard 1 set rate.
And there's been people who've challenged that over the years. And the courts have looked at it. They've heard the arguments of people who say, well, that's not a good way to do it. And they've heard arguments of people who say that is a good way to do it. And they've concluded, no, that's reasonable. That's rational. We're going to approve that way of doing things. That is consistent with the law. That's why this isn't a tax. Because what people do when they sue on these things, they say, this is actually a tax. So you got to call a tax. And you got to do it, you got to collect it differently and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, I digress.
Thank you.
I think it's important to understand, though.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's
It's a wonderful.
I agree.
It led to this discussion.
because, we're doing an assessment. Assessment is under certain rules. It could have been an ad valorem millage rate, and then it would be done.
No, ma'am, that's not correct because we're statutorily capped at 10 mills right now. We cannot increase the millage rate.
And I had a question about franchise fees as well, which are a totally separate issue apart from the fire assessment also. They I think sometimes the lines get blurred a little bit, but they're 2 totally separate issues, 2 totally separate collection rates or collection methodologies. And we're here today to talk about the fire assessment.
Okay, yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
go ahead.
And because they're capped on ad valorem, I don't mean to jump, because thank you for bringing this. This is a wonderful discussion because we're getting to the heart of the matter.
Agreed.
If they, I made my point about it's up to the 5 and any county commission to decide whether you want to fund this all through ad valorem or supplement with assessments. They're capped, which means, in order to pay that delta, to pay for the entire cost of the endeavor, they have no choice but to cut another core service, and they are, that would be the choice at that point.
Ms. Vaughn, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yes. My recommendation and my question is, why do we have to have an assessment? Why can't we just have a surcharge, a half-cent sales tax, where everybody in the county, everybody that uses pays it. Everybody, people that come into the county, people that leave the county, everybody pays it. And it has a sunset in 2050. And we collect that half-cent sales tax.
Make sure it's after I retire, please.
I mean, and we get a comprehensive plan on what we're gonna use it in, and we start collecting it. We get a plan together. I talked to you guys about the Better Jacksonville plan. They did it. I mean, we're not Jacksonville, but everybody pays it. It's a half-cent sales tax or a whole cent sales tax. We don't have to put it on as a assessment, but everybody that uses, everybody, you put that half-cent sales tax on, and you start collecting it. And everybody that uses pays for it. From every item, start putting it on. You talked about racetrack. You add it to it. You talk about a soda. It's on there. Every item that you use, it's on there. You collect it. And everybody across the board pays that sales tax.
Ms. Strong, Jacksonville, City of Jacksonville is a charter county as well as other ones are. And so I'm going to turn it over to the deputy clerk and she can explain. We can't just add half-cent sales taxes. Do you understand that? Do you understand that? We can't just do that arbitrarily.
What I'm saying is, we can think of a method where we can add where everybody pays it. And it's equal across the board.
Okay, let me get Mrs. Roden to,
Excuse me.
to answer.
I was just going to, in response to Ms. Strong's response with the half-cent sales tax, the county has maxed out all of its non-discretionary sales tax. We no longer have any available non-discretionary sales tax. The only taxes that we have available to implement would have to be dedicated to a specific source. So whether that be the jail or a hospital, we do have available tax amounts that we could allocate, but it has to be specific. And then, of course, when the completion of that project is done, then we have to do away with the tax. The only other tax that is there is called an emergency fire surcharge tax. That is not an option, and here's why. It is a cost-neutral tax, meaning that anything we generate from that, we have to reduce what we receive in ad valorem taxes. So it's not a generating tax whatsoever. In fact, only one county in the whole state of Florida utilizes that, and they are actively trying to get out of it because it is so poorly written and managed. It is not written well at all. There's not a lot of indication of how you can utilize it from the Department of Revenue. Believe me, we have checked into it. The issues that go along with it are based on if you implement it or you assess it at a rate. If you are too high in how you assess that, you have to issue rebates at the end of the year because we can't, again, we have to be able to turn around and reduce our millage rate. It's a very complicated tax and it's cost neutral. There's no actual benefit to it. But as far as the sales tax, all the non-discretionary sales tax has been maxed out.
I'll also add that, the rate that's been discussed is the 50% rate. There's still another 50% of the fire department that has to be funded, and right now it's coming from general fund. So I really think, at some point, and again, this is not, we're not talking about this right now, obviously, but down the road, I think it would be important for this board to look at how to diversify your revenue sources. Right now, your only revenue source is going to be this fire assessment if it goes through. I think it would be wise to look at, a franchise fee or something like that in the future. Again, just to say, if you want to stop coming out of the general fund to fund the fire department, what are some other ways we can generate revenue, right? And I think that that's a way of kind of diversifying that. And again, I'm not suggesting that we impose a fire assessment and a franchise fee at the same time or anything like that. I'm talking years down the road. Again, after I retire, y'all can deal with that. But, just something to consider, so.
Yes. And also with all the new building going in Bradford County, that's going to be a lot more revenue coming in.
And
to help.
impact fees are the other thing,
Yeah.
on discussion as well. So
So, yes,
I think,
you had a question earlier.
Impact fees are non-recurring. So just so y'all know that.
Right.
They're non-recurring.
yes, sir.
Real quick in regards to the structure, the commercial and the housing, the other thing you have to consider too is that houses are built with whatever material, they're, coated one way. As for commercial, unfortunately, they are coded one specific way, but you're also dealing with hazardous materials. So there's a lot more that goes into it when it comes down to it. So if you think of a racetrack, that's a very highly flexible material. So if something goes wrong, that's one of the issues. You know, Walmart has the same issue, a restaurant has the same issue. That's why we have to think about a commercial space and a home, because how they're classified in the coding, making sure that they're compliant, but also that they're not as, houses are not as hazardous as.
Yet it seems like they're being charged a lot less. Maybe they're not, we can't tell.
Well, just add up the square footage and then you can times it by 11 cents, and that's what you'll come up with. I mean, we can give you an example.
Well, there is. If the 100,000 square foot warehouse that belongs to the county, if that were privately held, that owner would pay, what's the math, $11,000 a year?
Hold on. So this is the one that we showed earlier. This is the example that we showed. This was Florida Tractor Repairs, just south of town. And again, on their property record card, it shows that their actual square footage, which they're going to be assessed on, is 10,845. And so if we multiply that by 11 cent, it comes up to $1,100 a year is what they will pay, compared to your 167. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, I don't mean to.
No. I was doing the same thing. I was adding it up on the calculator. Yeah, you had a question?
To state a few points. I think everybody needs to keep in mind that this is our starting point. I've worked here for over 20 years. I'm actually the longest tenured Bradford County emergency service employee. I remember I was here in the days of the volunteers. I remember when these two chiefs of mine were volunteers, in fact. I've lived in Bradford, Alachua, Lake, and Clay County as an adult. I've rented and I've owned, and I've seen my tax ratings, and also the difference in my insurance rates is very dependent on that ISO rating. So what we're looking at essentially is $14 a month if you break down that 167 for the year, and it's going to save the average homeowner about $1,900 a year, which is $160 a month. So you're saving $160 in insurance per month for a $14 payment per month. Like the I'm sorry, I'm not even really sure what we're debating. And I haven't always understood why my chief put the resources where he did, but I had a light bulb go off when he put up that map with the radius, the 5-mile radius, and it drops the best coverage to the most citizens with what he has. I would love to see coverage down to Brooker. When we first merged and the fire department was still under the sheriff, we had a pretty good house fire down at Brooker. I was in an ambulance that day. I was staffed in SART. I had a 25-minute response time. My firefighters were coming from Sampson City. I think they got there and had water on the fire in 10 minutes. My supervisor was out on the road doing her job. She got there, I think, in 15 minutes. She identified that we had 2 patients. She was able to triage them. She gave me information within 1 minute of being on scene that helped me choose the right treatment plan for my patient. It saved her life. That patient was my friend. I want Brooker covered. I want Hampton covered. I want all the areas covered. I've been here for 20 years. I have friends and loved ones all over this county. This is our starting point. And I think we just need to keep that in mind.
Well, and please understand, if you don't understand anything else that you leave today, we feel the same way you do. I wish that we had them all over our county. The job y'all do is just, it's wonderful. I've been in the back of an ambulance in Alachua County and they talked about y'all. So that's unquestionable. And please don't think that when we make suggestions or we look at the thought of maybe shutting down one, that it's taking anything away from y'all or the need that we have, because we do understand that.
My job's not on the line.
Absolutely. But we have to try to figure out a lot of factors that go into it. Do I think what we have right now is really good? Yes, I do. Absolutely. So please don't take it the wrong way. We care about every single one of y'all because we know that if we call you, you're going to do the best for us, and that's what we want. But we've got to we have to take all of the factors and look at the whole thing, because all of the people in the county are looking at us, and when we put that $167 on them, they're not going to break it down into 12 payments. You know, they're going to be upset about it because we have maxed out on our millage rate. We've maxed out on our tax, on our discretionary tax, and it's unfortunate, but it's where we are is this rural county. That's why we're trying desperately hard to bring businesses in, to make this area grow, so that we are able to take care of a fire department, that we don't have to do that. And instead of the costs going up, it would be wonderful if we could bring it back down. So please don't misunderstand our questioning. It's not that we don't care. I promise you. Okay?
And
Commissioner.
yes.
Yes, sir. I just want, I know we're going to continue to have a series of discussions and workshops. So it is to allow the citizens as well as us to ask all of those questions, but it's our duty as a board to look critically at every aspect of our budget so that we will be good stewards of your resources. And so we have to ask those hard questions, whether it's reasonable that we can do it. And for me, Chief, in the next year series, to focus a little bit more on the data of the fire response numbers. I know that we had the medical numbers in here, and I know when we did our resolution or whatever, we don't consider the medical aspect of it. It's the fire response, the fire data. So if we can have more of that, that will be more helpful to me and maybe nobody else, but for me, so that those numbers make sense, and those numbers and response time has a cost associated with it whenever the fire guys have to go out, or the fire team has to go out. So, but I know that the data that we looked at today had mostly the medical numbers in terms of the response. And then the other thing is, it's not just for the people's concern, is not to devalue what our fire department is doing. They're doing a fantastic job, a great job, and all of the areas that we have provided to the community is important, but we have to look at how we can trim, if that's possible, or how we can come up with some other source of income or revenue for it. And we can't do more because we're maxed at 10. We're at 10 mills now. And so, and I hear what you say about the hamburger and a soda per month, but some people in this community, that's a luxury that some of them are trying to decide between whether they buy the medicine or pay that portion of the rent. So those of us whose income is allowed that without hardship, for some people, it is a hardship.
Yeah. Well, and the good thing is, for those people that do struggle with that, we have a process in place where they can come, show that struggle and possibly get that exemption. So there is that process in place for those people who truly can't afford it. This is the handout that you have in your packet. So if you open your folder, it lists out exactly what you're asking for. So it tells you exactly what kind of fire it was, whether it was a structure fire.
That's good. Well, this was on our desk when we got here. We didn't see it before.
Yes, ma'am. Yep. So you'll have a chance to be able to go through that and look at it. And that was what I tried to display in the run numbers that I gave. The 1,000 or so calls were fire related. The others were EMS related. And so again, everything is broken out in here, and it specifically says there's EMS, emergency medical services incident, and that's broken out in there as well. So you can very clearly see what's EMS and what's fire, and that's all laid out for you.
Chief, why don't you pull that slide back up so she can take another look at it?
Right, so the 1,223 were fire-related calls. So those are specifically related to car crashes, structure fires, brush fires, vehicle fires, things of that nature. And that's when I went through and broke down, all the different types. Now, total incidents, that includes the EMS calls, we had 7,536. But again, I went through and I'll skip through here, but spoke about how many structure fires. And so it's in this presentation, and you certainly have it in your packet there as well. And would love to entertain, any questions or any clarification you'd like on any of that stuff.
And thank you for your presentation.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you want, yes, ma'am. Sure.
I'm Charlene Thomas, I'm a broker, also the town clerk for 36 years. So I've seen a lot of things going on, volunteers. I definitely know all about those. I've worked with them. We had a great volunteer department, but we went the same way everybody else. No volunteers. We only had about 4 active ones. So we understand, how we've lost our fire station. But if you live in Brooker and you're sitting out there and you have no fire protection, and I mean, we have nothing. We have fire hydrants and we have a water system. We have no way of protection other than Sanson City, which we do appreciate. So I just wanted to say that the 167, I understand. I'd like to see it the $84 because we live out there in a small little town that has hardly any income. A lot of people retired. So I would like that to be considered. I do appreciate you commissioners working on all of this and trying to get a reasonable amount. But I did want to say, nobody likes assessments. Nobody likes anything like that, or taxes. But we do understand in Brooker. I don't make the decisions out there. I do work for a board. And we appreciate Diane. She's been there so faithful and brought us all the information. Ben has been tremendous help. We hope to see this fire department come to Brooker. So we do appreciate all of your help here in the county. And we're not against the assessment in Brooker. I'll do everything I can to promote it because I want a fire station. I live in the city limits of Brooker. I do not live 10 miles out toward Worthington Springs where they have nothing. So I just wanted to share that with you. We do appreciate your hard work.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. And we are definitely going to be working hard to try and get that station in Brooker as soon as possible. Sooner than later, for sure.
And I can tell you that the residents in Brooker that are in that 5-mile radius around that station are going to benefit more than anybody else in this county because they're going to go from a class 10 currently to a class 5 the day that fire station opens. That's going to be a huge, because you have hydrants. So you're going to go not to a 5X, you're going to go to a class 5 as soon as that fire station opens. So that's going to be a huge benefit for the people in that region.
So what you're saying is, even if we did go with the 167, the citizens in Brooker will save more than that on their ISO from going from a
I'm not
10
an
to a
insurance
5.
man, but based on the numbers I've seen.
On the numbers, that's what I'm looking at.
Yes.
And you had one question. Right, yes. Mrs. Ellison.
Are you all keep talking about the $14 a month, are we gonna be billed monthly? Or
No, ma'am.
It's gonna come with our ad valorem tax?
Tax
Yeah.
bill. Yes, ma'am.
Which we can pay quarterly. Quarterly makes it really almost affordable.
Hmm.
I mean, it's a really good idea. And, and I'm doing the math in my head, trying to figure out what my bill's gonna be. And I'm not against, we need this, and we should be paying for it. We apparently haven't been paying for it. So we need to, and we need the Brooker Fire Station. When you did those circles,
Mhm.
is Northeast Star, like around Old Lonnie Road, is that inside the circle or outside the circle?
Oh, let's take a look.
It's inside, that's the city.
It's the city, I'm sorry.
So. And you were asking for,
So that you can see that part of it is outside, part of the city of Stark is outside any circles. So I'm guessing,
right, you're talking about in this area right here,
well, inside of Stark,
inside of Stark.
that,
In the circle.
Well, that's covered by the City of Stark Fire Department.
Not representative.
so the city of Stark within the city limit.
They're covered by the City of Stark.
So they already have the 5.
I believe you're a class 4, is that correct? 5, class 5. Class 5 for the
It's
City
5.
of Stark. Yep.
And when you, I mean, these are, we already have all the fire departments that are shown here, except for Brooker.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, Brooker's on there.
Brooker's on here, but yeah, only.
But it's not built. Right.
Correct. Correct.
So, Brooker is the only one that's going to experience a change unless we withdraw
Correct.
the rest of the.
Yes, ma'am. And as you can see, I mean, without Brooker, that's a big gap out here. You know, that's a
Oh,
big
yeah.
gap in coverage.
We obviously.
Sure. But what you want when you look at these type maps is you want those circles to overlap. And like I said, as we move through this presentation and you see those circles start to spread out and they don't connect anymore, and it turns away from a Venn diagram into just circles on a map, that's what we don't want to see, right? That's where more people are being affected. And so this is what you currently have right now with the addition of Brooker. And I think this is really good coverage for our county. Yes, ma'am.
Right there in Longview.
Yep.
Majority of people in Longview are 5X.
Correct. Well, a lot of people in Lottie would be a 5 because they're within 1,000 feet from a hydrant.
Across the street. And then
Are you a 5X?
should be a 5X.
No, you should be a 5. 5 is better than 5X.
Oh, 5.
Yeah, right.
5 is better than 5X.
Correct. Yep.
And then the station is 5 blocks.
Right.
from
Yeah,
the
you
house.
should be a 5 right now.
So I should
Oh.
be getting the best.
The best insurance rate you can possibly get with our current coverage.
Okay, well, if there's no other questions, I felt like we've covered this really good today, and Chief Carter, I do appreciate for your presentation. Our next meeting will be March 18th at 5:30, right here, so that'll be a night meeting. So I encourage everyone, if you got questions, please come to that meeting, bring your questions. We will do our best to answer them, and tell your neighbors and friends, if they got questions, come to the meeting or call Ben and we will get the questions answered.
What I'll offer is, obviously this is meant for the grievance process, but this email is operational right now. So if anybody has questions about the fire assessment that they would like answered at this next workshop, send them to that email, and we'll get those questions, hopefully addressed before this next workshop. And I would ask the board just for a little bit of direction before the next workshop as well as to what you would like to see. I'd hate to come in and do this presentation again and put you all to sleep with watching this one more time. So what would you like to see at this next workshop?
Chief, I don't think you're putting us to sleep at all. I think you're just putting the information out there. And I think if people come to the meeting that have not heard this before, I think it would be worth doing the presentation again. That's
Happy to do it.
Right. The only thing I'd like to see is get a couple examples of commercial buildings, pull it up like you showed me, and then and do it by the 11 cent a square foot.
Okay.
So it'd be 167 per household, $11 per square foot, and $47 for vacant property. And pull some of those examples up, and then that way people can actually see, and then we'll get a little more information.
I'm hoping he's taking notes behind me so I remember all this stuff.
And maybe even like Miss Ellickson had said, maybe even break it down into that quarterly.
Sure.
And
That's a
then
great
so
idea.
people can see it that way.
Great
So
idea.
Right.
And if possible, with the different charges, like the 25, the 50, how much would still be left to fund if we adopted that is the assessment? How much would still come from Avalon that we have to do that with?
Understood.
Okay. And again, I thank everyone for being here. Excellent questions. Thank you all so much. And
Can I say one more thing?
yes,
And any kind of cost savings. I know you've worked in it many, many years. Anything that you guys, it can come from y'all, where you think we can save money. We don't want to shut down a fire station. Trust me. But we want to bring the price down as much as we can. We might not can, but that's what we're looking at. And it had been mentioned at another meeting about the possibility. That's why it got brought up today. we don't want to do that. Okay. All right.
Sure. Well, I say sure. I'm not running the
Yeah,
meeting.
yes, come on, Kevin. You got another $75?
Yes, yes, 75. I want to bring this to y'all. I am the chairman for our safety committee within Bradford County Fire Rescue. My name's Kevin Momley, for those of you who don't know me. And Miss Andrews made a very good point with her last statement about how can we save cost savings. And as I think everybody feels in this room, shutting down a facility is not really a viable option. But I want to point out to you, as Miss Roden had mentioned about hiring some more full-time employees to cut down on our overtime, I also want to make the point, just for you to ponder on between now and the next workshop, is the cost it is to the county for injuries. And Chief Carter put up there that we get 7 firefighters for a house fire. And just my 33 years of experience in the fire department, that's a very unsafe practice. We need more, as the national standard said, 16, if I remember correctly. The national standard is 16 for a standard house fire. And so we're doing, as we've all discussed, we're doing much more with much less than other places are. And I personally see those injuries, whether it be a burn, minor burn, or a strained back, because we're overworking our employees. And by having more employees full-time, more people that we can put on a fire scene in a shorter period of time, that's going to be an extensive cost savings to the county in cost of workers' comp and injuries. It's just something I wanted to put out there. It wasn't really brought up, but it's tied to the assessment in a way.
You guys know, you're there, you see it from the inside. You know what you could cut and what you can't. And comments like that is very important for us to know.
And Chief, if there is another presentation and more data and information, if you can get it to us, it'll be helpful. So just to study it, absorb it. But, for young and tender eyes, it's sometimes a little hard to see it when we just get it just down.
Sure, absolutely. And that was the point. We wanted to give it to you today to be able to, I wanted to give this first initial presentation for you to kind of be able to digest that information, and then to come back at the next workshop with some more questions. So.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just to clarify the workshop dates,
Yes.
we have the next budget workshop is March the 4th. Okay? The next fire assessment workshop is March the 18th.
March the 18th at 5:30.
Yes, sir. And Stan Tech will be here for that.
Yes. Okay. Did I say March 4th?
No,
I did.
You said,
I said
you
18th.
said the 18th.
I got backup over here.
Knowledge budget workshop coming up too.
Okay.
And what was that date?
March 4th at 10:30 a.m. is the next budget workshop.
Some more.
They're watching out for me. They know I'm full of making mistakes. So, all right. Well, thank you. If that's it, no more. All right. Well, thank you.